After World War II, first Billy Hampson and then Willis Edwards had spells as manager of Leeds United. Hampson managed Leeds United for 12 years, a reign that ended in 1947. One of the legacies of the Hampson era was his scouting network. In times of austerity after World War II, clubs were using their scouts to discover new young talent. Hampson's network had connections in South Wales.
Well, John was rubbish at school in lessons, but was brilliant at sports, most sports I think, and I think he got scouted down in Swansea by a well-known Welsh scout called Jack Pickard, who talked his parents into letting him come to Leeds, even though his mum apparently said he couldn't go because he didn't have a passport.
They had trials and obviously worked out, and I think straight away sort of Major Buckley recognised that this was a major talent.
Major Frank Buckley was appointed Leeds United manager in 1948. It was a clear statement of intent by chairman Sam Bolton. Buckley was a shrewd dealer in the transfer market, as well as a highly regarded coach and innovator in the game. A tough centre-half in his playing days, along with his military background, saw a new, tougher approach to training at Ellen Road.
Frank Buckley described the young John Charles as like an Adonis of youth when he came into his office and presented himself there, and was always impressed by not just his physique but his manner as well.
Big John, he was just a one-off. He could hit it, he could head it, he could. When I get the ball, he seemed to know where to go, with the open space. He knew where the open space was before he didn't have to look at it. He just knew where it was.
John Charles came around, I guess, at the right time in terms of being someone you could look up to. You know, people would go to the cinema to see people on the big screen, and John Charles, I guess, had that kind of effect as well.
Buckley insisted that players were equally good with left or right foot. I think Charles was okay in that respect anyway, but he was tried all over the place, but I think it was finally decided that his best position was going to be in the centre of defence.
In John Charles's first full season, Leeds conceded only 45 league goals, 18 less than the previous season.
We were looking at regular kind of 40,000-50,000 crowds, which Leeds hadn't been getting on a consistent basis. And when you consider they hadn't won anything, they were still flirting between the first and second division quite regularly. And the ground itself wasn't particularly well developed. It was just a huge terrace sweeping round 3/4 of the ground.
Despite Ellen Road needing improvements, the increased gates helped reduce the huge debt, but there was no money for new signings. Buckley carried on with his transfer dealings, but when he sold Len Browning, who'd been a decent centre-forward for Leeds, the goals dried up. Promotion was needed, so Buckley tried John Charles at centre-forward.
His record playing in attack for Leeds is something like a goal a game. The only thing that really was a problem for Frank Buckley was that he didn't have two John Charleses, because he was so important at the back and so important up front that if he wasn't in one position, they'd be weak there, no matter how strong he made them in the other.
As a team, Leeds weren't having great success really, but Charles's star quality was undeniable, you know, and it's a case of, you know, how do you fit him in really? And like I say, until Jack Charlton came along, they didn't really know how to do that.
As such, the club's league form was an issue, and Leeds didn't look like breaking into the top two. Frustration was building in the boardroom with the results, as the club's star man was being seemingly moved around the team. It was the 1952-53 season when Buckley decided that Charles was going to be a striker. John Charles scored 26 goals from 28 starts at centre-forward, including a hat-trick against Brentford, which Buckley described as the best he'd ever seen.
Buckley really transformed Leeds into a modern football club. He even made some alterations to the kit. He changed the team jerseys, patterns of blue and gold. He was involved with everything from ticket prices to scouting to youth policy. But he started to lose faith in the board of directors at the time, who he didn't feel were backing him enough. And also, I wonder if he lost heart a little bit, because although he had John Charles, he couldn't find a player to fill the gap that John Charles left at the other end of the pitch. And he decided that there was more potential at third division Walsall than the board at Leeds United was showing at the time, and announced his intention to leave.
Buckley's replacement was Raish Carter, a flamboyant goal scorer who'd won countless honours at a young age, but was robbed of greater accolades by World War II.
He possibly wasn't great for individual players' motivations or self-esteem and self-confidence, because I think he thought he'd done it and therefore why can't you do it as a player? And I think Leeds struggled at first.
When he inherited the management of John Charles, who had all the ability that Carter had, but didn't seem to have this character, this self-belief, this confidence, and the arrogance that Carter had, which to Carter, he couldn't understand that.
John Charles saw Raish Carter as overly arrogant, whereas John Charles, obviously, as everyone knows, was a very mild-mannered and modest fella for all the skills he possessed.
Irrespective of the relationship with Carter, Charles had his most prolific season, setting club records in 1953. His tally of 42 league goals from 39 appearances, including 5 hat-tricks, is a Leeds record which will probably never be beaten. He was the Football League's top scorer and the first Welshman to achieve that honour. But despite his goal scoring, defensive problems meant promotion again evaded Leeds.
If you think about it now, that calibre of player playing in the second division is unheard of now. You know, it's literally someone of the star quality of a Harry Kane or someone like that, or Messi playing in the second tier, and that just wouldn't happen.
Charles repeatedly demonstrated his star qualities, but at a club stuck in Division 2.
When a player wants to leave in those days, it's not because of money, because there was a maximum wage. All players could get a maximum, that's it.
Leeds wouldn't let him go, so he would knuckle down every time that they refused to let him leave, and try to get Leeds there so he could go with them.
Jack Charlton came back from national service and after just a couple of appearances before that point was selected for the first team. That allowed Carter to try Charles at his old position of inside right. The team started to click, with Charles allowed to take on defensive as well as attacking duties. Leeds got stronger as the season went on, with Charles scoring 28 from 29 starts in his new role. Leeds won 8 of their last 9 games, with John Charles scoring 12 goals. The team finished in second place. Leeds United and John Charles were promoted to Division 1.
To an extent, they had to maybe disprove the accusation that they were John Charles United, which had been the publicity while they were in the second division. But his performances didn't really do anything to change that impression. But as a team, they took to the first division strongly. They beat Everton 5-1 at Elland Road on the opening day, and they kept winning after that. They went to second in the league. They were up there with Manchester United as autumn began.
But it was autumn 1956 when events outside of football changed the fortunes of Leeds United. On the evening of Monday 17th September, residents were woken as the night sky was lit up. The West Stand at Elland Road was on fire, the only significant stand at the ground. The stand housed 50 years of history, memorabilia and records, as well as the current team's shirts, balls and all their equipment. By the morning, all that was left was the metal frame.
There was £180,000 worth of damage, but the insurance didn't even cover half of it. So you think, well, you're trying to do the maths and it's not going to work out. And suddenly, everything changes.
The clubs around, the amateur clubs all mucked in, and we were short of something to find it. Somebody would ring round or somebody would ring in, you can have this, you can have that one.
There were some attempts at fundraising to make up the shortfall, and Sam Bolton hoped that maybe an FA Cup run would bring in the gate receipts they needed to rebuild and build a modern new stand, but when it came down to it, they were running out of options, and selling John Charles started to look like the most likely one.
You've suddenly gone from a situation where you establish yourself in the first division, your crowds are good, you've got this phenomenal talent, and you have to sell him.
There were bids from Real Madrid, and there were rumours of Lazio were interested. But the Fiat family who owned Juventus, they were quite influential, and they had ways of stopping other people from making offers for John Charles and making it very clear that they were the club that were going to be signing him.
For fans looking on, it must have been despairing, to be honest, to see this unravel. Much as they loved John Charles, much as they were happy for him to go to Juventus and have this level of success, which again was phenomenal and unheard of as well. It must have been heartbreaking to look on and watch that happening.
John Charles was sold to Juventus for £65,000, which was a British transfer record after protracted discussions at the Queen's Hotel in Leeds. Charles finished the season in style. In his final game that season, he shook hands with the Sunderland captain Don Revie against the backdrop of a new stand being built. Charles scored twice against Sunderland, ending the season with 38 goals from 40 appearances. His record then was played 316 matches, 162 in defence and 154 in attack, having scored 154 goals. Italy got John Charles, the greatest striker in the English game.